Welcome to the instructional webinar on using the Phonics First Instructors Small Group Diagnostic Assessment of Decoding and Encoding Skills. I'm Denise Sherman, your host on all things assessment. Let's get started. In this video, we'll walk you through the essential steps needed to assess your students' reading and spelling skills. We'll discuss the reader phases, identify each assessment and its purposes, learn how to administer, score, and interpret results, and examine how to design targeted implementation and instruction for your struggling readers and students with dyslexia. As teachers, we know that skilled reading goes far beyond decoding, breaking down words for reading, and encoding, breaking down words for spelling. Fluency and comprehension and composition are built upon a solid foundation of phonetic skills. Many students struggle with decoding and encoding far into middle school and high school. The small group diagnostic assessment will help you identify areas where students need targeted instruction and help inform your decisions on how to best intervene using Brainspring's Orton-Gillingham-based approach. Let's begin by digging into the Phonics First Instructors assessments. These assessments are available in your digital library. The Phonics First assessment was designed for K-12 intervention and remediation. Structures was developed for 4 through 5 in the classroom and 6 through 12 in intervention. The examples in this webinar are from the structures. Both assessments were designed using the same format. The major difference is the terminology. So if you've taken Phonics First, you'll be familiar with the term layers, and for structures, you'll be familiar with blocks. There is a slight variation in the scope and sequence of the skills between both programs. For these assessments, we look at the phases of readers because of how Phonics First was developed to cover a wide range of students in grades K through 12. It's imperative to meet our students where they're at. The following information about the reader phases is available in the Phonics First Assessment Guide on page 15 for your reference. So typically developing students in kindergarten are beginning readers. Some students with limited print or exposure to English are also beginning readers. Emerging readers are your students in grades 1st and 2nd. Typically, developing readers are in grades 3 through 5, and proficient readers are typically in grades 6 and above. It is important to note that the phases do not always equal grade level. As a teacher of middle school and high school students, I often had students who were developing readers. So I would meet them where they were at, using these diagnostic assessments to help me determine that. Consider your students' entire educational experiences and profile when considering where they fall within these phases. Because we are looking at both Phonics First and structures for this assessment webinar, we will be talking about the developing reader. But again, you can look at these phases on page 15 of the Phonics First assessment for more information. Instruction for your students in the developing phase should include both skills and morphemes, including affixes, as well as syllabication. Let's begin looking at the diagnostic assessments and their various types and what they are used for. The yellow assessments, the letter formation and recognition and basic sounds, are our foundational skills. And so the letter recognition assessment and letter writing is the assessment students will connect the letter names and graphemes. The basic sounds assessments is where students identify the phoneme and grapheme correspondence. The phonetic words provide the opportunity for students to encode and decode phonetically regular words that follow the skills covered in that block or layer. The pseudo words assessment includes nonsense words that assess a student's ability to apply the phonetic principles of unfamiliar words. This assessment helps reveal the skill gaps for compensating readers who have memorized a lot of words. Pseudo words are typically read-only words, but you can use them for spelling. Just keep in mind that some sounds have multiple spellings. Additionally, each block and layer have a set of red words. These are high frequency and often irregular words such as was and again. They may also include words that you have not taught the skill for yet, such as be or by. Once you get to your layers 2 through 4 and your blocks 2 through 5, you also have the opportunity to assess students using multisyllabic words using the multisyllable words assessment. These words follow the same phonetic rules as your phonetic words assessment. We know that your time with your students is valuable. It will not be necessary to use each assessment at every level. We will discuss in more detail momentarily which assessments to give for each student. First, let's take a moment and look at the various forms. The reading form displays the word list for students to read. You can display it on a tablet or on your board, or you can print the reading word list for your students. The the spelling forms that can be printed for each spelling assessment are for the student responses. You print one form for each student and they write their responses on that form. And the scoring form is for you as the teacher. Print one form per assessment and you will write your responses to the student's responses on that form. As we talk about those teacher scoring forms, one thing to keep in mind is that there are two, a Form A and a Form B. This allows you to use one for reading or one for spelling. It also gives you the opportunity to use one for a pretest or post-test. Most teachers use the phonetic word list as an opportunity to do spelling because spelling unravels a lot of skill deficits or misconceptions for your students because often older compensating readers have memorized a lot of words. So this just gives you that opportunity to have two forms to assess your students with. Now that we've looked at the form, let's talk about getting started. The Where to Start page is on page 14 of both the Phonics First and Structures assessments. And again, in greater detail in Phonics First, that page 15 looks at those reader phases and how those impact where to begin assessing. So this would be where to begin for a developing reader. You would start with your phonetic one, or your block one phonetic words. Your letter writing and recognition and basic sounds is where you would start with your beginning and intermediate ELL students or students with significant delays in reading development. Some students will continue to the block one pseudo words. You're going to assess your block one red words as discussed in your level 1 training for Phonics First and Structures. And then as you move through later blocks 2 through 5 or layers 2 through 4, you will use the multisyllable word lists. So when you're getting started, remember, you're going to use those foundational skills for students with minimal literacy skills. For everyone else, you're going to always pre-assess your red words, your phonetic words, and then if needed, your pseudo words. One of the amazing new features of the Phonics First and Structures assessment is that each block contains an assessment and implementation roadmap. This roadmap helps you understand where to begin teaching and your next steps. Let's look at the top of this assessment roadmap. At the top right, it reviews that you need to you need to assess those block one red words, then teach incorrectly spelled red words to those students. Then you're going to begin assessing using your phonetic words spelling assessment, Form A. Based on those results, you're going to determine if you're going to begin teaching or if you're going to reaffirm those results using those pseudo words. Once you've given that pseudo word assessment, you can then again analyze your responses and determine if you're going to begin teaching or if you're going to go ahead and reinforce those skills and then post-test. This assessment and implementation roadmap just helps you guide your next steps. So now that we've looked at that, let's begin the assessment process. So I would assess my read words using spelling. Many older students have mastered the reading of these skills, so by doing a spelling assessment, I can unravel many skill gaps that I need to work on. And read words are mastered when a student can read and spell them. When giving this assessment, I would print that spelling form for my students and a scoring form for myself, and be able to read directly from my spelling form. One of the nice features is that there are sentences for homophones, so that, for instance, I can say number 7, see, as in I can see the black cat. That gives my student additional information as they write each of those words. All right, so in that sequence, I've now assessed my read words, so I'm going to move on to my phonetic words. When assessing those phonetic words, I'm going to dictate the word, and my student will write them. Sam is my student. He's writing them on his phonetic word lists. For a spelling assessment, I'm going to let him do the entire assessment, and then I will score his responses. So in analyzing, I can go ahead and use my instructional page before each assessment that goes in depth over the scoring quick reference guide. I want to make sure for spelling that I am identifying correct, incorrect, no answer, self-corrections, and reversals. Incorrect, self-correct, and reversals reveal diagnostic information that I can apply to my teaching practices. So when they make those self-corrections and those incorrect responses, I do want to write on this form their miscues or mistakes, so that way I can analyze it right there. I have lost many papers that are stapled to the back of these scoring forms because they get torn off in a folder. So I score it directly on the scoring form by analyzing that spelling list. So let's look over Sam's responses. For number 1, he has correct with wit. Number 2, he has log. And then I get to number 3, where he stated he wrote vet instead of vat. So I'm going to mark that E on the scoring form. Cobb he had, and then fad, he wrote feb. So I'm going to mark that E and the B. He has hid, jib, sob, and then for peg, he made that same E for, or A for E replacement in this case. So I would then continue with Rob and finish scoring that assessment. For our purposes, I'm gonna let you know now he got an 87%, so that we can know that we're gonna move on to that pseudo words assessment to verify his results. When we are finished with that pseudo words, we're gonna come back to his spelling assessment in a moment. So again, the pseudo words assessment just tells us a lot of more detailed information, as in can they apply that phonetic code to unfamiliar words. So I would print or display the reading word list, and I would print myself a scoring form to score as he reads each word in real time. So he reads and I'm going to score. And on that same form, for the instructions before the pseudo word list, it tells me the directions of how to tally results and give those directions, as well as my scoring quick reference guide. For a reading assessment, I'm also looking for correct, incorrect, no answer, and self-corrections, marking those items. Additionally, I want to note if my student is reading those words correctly and automatically. That reading automaticity is going to help my student build fluency. And when they are reading more fluently, that transitions into sentences and connected text. So by identifying if they can read the word correctly with automaticity, which is the whole word in 2 seconds or less, I am able to carry that information forward. So I want to make sure to identify that in this assessment. So as Sam reads each word, I'm going to mark on his assessment. So he reads Knopf. Oops. He reads Kaz instead of Kez, so I'm going to mark that A. He read Vot. And then for number 4, he's going to read Pap instead of Fep. So I mark that A and that P. He has Juz, Tas, and then he reads Hith. So for that one, number 7, I'm going to mark it as just correct. He did not read that up with automaticity, so he only gets 1 check mark. He has Wud for Wub, and then Muff for number 9, so I'm going to check that one as just correct. And number 10, he read Chaz for Cav. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that digraph in that initial consonant error. I would continue to score each assessment. Again, the spelling I can score when he finishes, and that pseudo words is a reading assessment, so I want to finish scoring as he's going. In addition to the scoring information, I also have observation boxes at the bottom that allow me to denote if he's making reversals, having vowel confusions, or if he's guessing the word or reading sound by sound. So it just allows me to be more diagnostic in my teaching and assessing approach. So once Sam is done with his assessment, I would analyze those results. He had 87% on that phonetic spelling assessment, 77% on that reading assessment. I noticed he had B&D reversals, short A and short E confusions, and some digraph errors such as CH, SH, and PH. So I'm going to take this information with me as I continue to look at my assessment and implementation roadmap. When we started, we looked at the top. Now we're going to look at the center piece. As you notice, there are 2 tracks, the teach lessons and reinforce lessons. Teach lessons means I'm going to teach a complete multisensory introduction, including showing my new card, establishing a key word, relate using a multisensory activity, commit to memory in the sand, and reinforce with dictation. So that would be how I would address those short vowel errors, the B&D reversals, and those digraphs. For those errors or for the lessons that he was really strong in, I would just reinforce because I still want to build my 3-part drill and I want to build that automaticity to build fluency using all of those sounds in my early layers and blocks. So for reinforcing skills, I'm going to show my card. I'm going to add it to my 3-part drill and reinforce in dictation. In that block or layer, I'm also going to teach any morpheme or affix lessons and syllabication to make sure my student has everything that they need to be successful as they continue through their journey using Phonics First and structures. In addition to the implementation roadmaps, we also have the Block 1 error analysis. Every block and layer has this error analysis feature that allows you to have more information, such as how to teach that skill, incorporating the sound wall, focusing on skill intensives, introducing the concept of a closed syllable possibly earlier because you have students that need to know the why. So we have additional ideas for you. This is just a short sampling of many, many opportunities for teaching all the various different components within that blocker layer. The assessment sequence will be the same as you move through each block and layer. So again, you're always going to pre-assess your red words. You're going to use your phonetic words as spelling. If you need to, you use your pseudo words, and then you can use the multi-syllable words. Some teachers use them for reading, some will use them for spelling. That is up for your discretion. You know your students. I had some high school students that I used it for spelling and some that I used it for reading. But one of the nice things to keep in mind as you do this is that there is a pronunciation column that will help you as you work with your students. Some students, when they read multisyllabic words, will break them up following different syllable patterns, but that is still correct because they're reading the words. So for instance, number 6 is majesty, so they may read majesty instead of majesty. And so that would still be correct. You would just want to circle that correct pronunciation. Additionally, for number 4, that word may not be in their receptive vocabulary, but they know the VCV choice division. So they may say livid and go, I think that's correct, and keep reading through the assessment. So for that one, you wouldn't mark it correct, but you would circle that pronunciation on your form so that you have that idea that they can still decode it. They just can't maybe recognize it because it's not part of their receptive vocabulary. If you need to, you can always access the syllabication word definitions at the back of the Syllabication Guide as you continue teaching your students. So keep in mind as you work with your students that when teaching in Tier 2 intervention settings, we recommend groups up to 6 for Tier 2 and up to 90 minutes, or a minimum, I should say, of 90 minutes per week. You can increase the time and lower the group accordingly to meet your students' needs. Additionally, in remediation settings of Tier 2, we recommend groups of 4 or less and for 120 minutes minimum. And you can increase the time or lower the number of students as needed for those situations. So as you continue your assessment journey, keep in mind at or above 85%, you're going to reinforce those skills, building automaticity and accuracy. You're going to also teach syllabication and morphology. If a student scores between 65 and 84%, you're going to teach those missed skills, reinforce skills appropriately, and then teach morphology and syllabication as you go. And for students at or below 64%, you're going to want to do some intensive intervention. You're most likely going to be teaching most of that layer or block, and you're going to reteach those sound symbol basics while addressing morphology, affixes, and syllabication. Phonics First instructors were designed to be diagnostic in nature. You can progress monitor as you do your dictation and skill intensives. Spell checks and checkups are a great informal progress monitoring tool as well. Reassess regularly using the diagnostic assessments. Just a few follow-up tips for success. As you continue using your assessments, begin with spelling. You can assess you can assess a group at one time, and you can discover more skill gaps. Follow up with the reading assessments as needed. Track both accuracy and automaticity to build that fluency. Use the assessment and implementation roadmaps to help guide your assessment journey and your instruction. Refer to the AIR analysis for instructional concepts. They have a lot of ideas. Support your students using appropriate accommodation and individualized instruction. We want to thank you so much for joining us today on this deep dive of the Phonics First Instructors Assessment. Please use the QR code to check your understanding. I will leave it here for a moment, but the quiz link will also be available in the video description. And I want to thank you again on behalf of myself and the wonderful team here at Brainspring. We hope that this assessment information has been helpful and it will help serve your students as you start your next school year. Thank you again, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel for additional content.